Section 1. I woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of my phone blowing up nonstop. It wasn't a single notification. It was hundreds of them. News alerts, social media pushes, text messages from friends I hadn't spoken to in months. Even automated emergency broadcast system updates popping up on my lock screen like the world was ending. The screen flickered bright white in my dim bedroom, flooding my vision with bold, screaming headlines that made my half-asleep brain freeze the second I read them. Global commodity prices collapse unprecedentedly. All market values depreciated 10,000 times overnight. Economic system on verge of total collapse. I sat up straight in my bed, my heart thudding hard against my ribs, the last traces of sleep vanishing in an instant. I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Miami. A regular 26-year-old ordinary guy with a dead-end office job, a tiny rented 2-bedroom house, and exactly 1,027,482 sitting dormant in my personal bank account. That money was my entire life savings, years of overtime, skip vacations, strict budgeting, an endless grind. It wasn't enough to make me rich by traditional American standards, not enough to buy a mansion or a private jet. But it was enough to let me live a stable, secure life without worrying about rent or bills for decades. Or at least, that's what I thought before last night. Rubbing the blur from my eyes, I tapped open the top trending national news article, my fingers moving fast and shaky. The report was posted 10 minutes ago, verified by every major American news outlet, cross-confirmed with federal economic agencies, and the content was so absurd, so mind-bendingly impossible, that I almost thought I was trapped inside a vivid nightmare. Overnight, for absolutely no traceable reason, every single commodity, asset, product, and service on planet Earth had crashed in value by exactly 10,000 times. 10,000 times. A brand new luxury Ferrari supercar that had retailed for $280,000 yesterday was now worth exactly $28. A high-end Miami beachfront villa worth $1.8 million was now priced at $180,000. A full week of 5-star luxury resort accommodation in the Caribbean, private island included, cost a mere 5 cents. Groceries, electronics, furniture, gasoline, luxury watches, corporate stocks, real estate, private yachts, everything had bottomed out to infinitesimal, laughable prices that defied all logic, all economic rules, all common sense humanity had built for centuries. The entire global economy had essentially erased itself while the world slept. I stared at the screen, dumbfounded, my mind struggling to process the scale of the disaster. I scrolled through comment sections, live news broadcasts, emergency government press releases, and every single source told the exact same story. There was no inflation, no market crash, no war or pandemic to explain it. It was a supernatural, universal price reset that no economist, politician, or scientist could begin to comprehend. Everyone's wealth was evaporating in real time. A person who had $10 million yesterday was now left with $1,000 of actual value. Middle-class families who'd spent decades building equity suddenly owned houses worth less than a cup of coffee used to cost. Billionaires were waking up broke. Millionaires were now poor. Every ordinary working citizen on the planet had lost 99.99% of their net worth in a single night. Panic was exploding across every state, every country, every continent. I swung my legs over the bed, stumbled out of my bedroom, and walked straight to the kitchen counter where my laptop sat open. My hands were still trembling as I logged into my official Bank of America personal account, desperate to check my own balance, terrified that my life savings had vanished along with everyone else's wealth. The page loaded in 2 seconds flat. My eyes locked onto the bold digital number displayed front and center. Available balance: 1,027,482,00. No change, no depreciation, no market adjustment, no overnight loss of value. The number was exactly the same as it had been before I went to bed last night. I froze completely, staring at the screen in stunned silence for a full 10 seconds. My breath caught in my throat. I refreshed the page frantically, over and over, convinced there was a glitch, a system error, a temporary display bug, but every refresh yielded the exact same result. My balance hadn't dropped by a single cent. It hadn't fluctuated, hadn't adjusted, hadn't depreciated with the rest of the global economy. That's when a faint, crisp system prompt popped up in the center of my vision, semi-transparent and unmissable, floating above my laptop screen with a cold, mechanical tone that existed only inside my consciousness. Fixed assets system activated. Unique host identified. Ethan Hale. Exclusive rule bound. Your personal capital value is completely fixed and unaffected by any global price fluctuation, market collapse, or economic reset. While all worldly assets depreciate infinitely, your $1 million baseline wealth retains 100 of its original purchasing power permanently. You are the sole constant wealth carrier on planet Earth. My brain short-circuited. It wasn't a bug. It wasn't a dream. It was real. While every single human being on the planet had their money rendered practically worthless overnight, I was completely unaffected. My $1 million balance was still a genuine, full-value $1 million in a world where a single original dollar was now functionally equivalent to 10,000 post-collapse dollars. I wasn't just a millionaire anymore. In this new world, I was the only real billionaire, trillionaire. Untouchable financial god walking the face of the earth. A regular burger that cost $5 yesterday now costs $0.0005. A brand new top-tier luxury sports car was $28. A private island was less than a dime. And I had over $1 million full value. Unfiltered. Original American dollars sitting in my bank account. The math was insane. Every single dollar I own now had 10,000 times the purchasing power it had yesterday. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the system prompt fading slowly from my vision. A slow, unbelievable thrill crawling up my spine, replacing my earlier panic with pure, electrifying excitement. All those years of scrimping and saving, all the boring overtime shifts, all the sacrifices I'd made to build my savings had suddenly turned into the most powerful financial advantage in human history. I'd always been ordinary, average, just another face in the American working crowd. Now I was the only constant in a world of total economic chaos. I stood up and walked to the front window, pulling back the curtain to stare out at my suburban street. Chaos was already unfolding outside. Neighbors were pouring out of their houses in pajamas and workout clothes, screaming into their phones, arguing in hysterics, crying in shock. I saw a middle-aged man standing in his front yard staring blankly at his brand-new pickup truck, which he'd financed for $60,000 last year. Today, that truck was worth $6. His entire life's major purchase had depreciated to the price of a cheap fast food meal. A woman across the street collapsed on her lawn sobbing, having just checked her retirement fund and discovering her $100,000 nest egg was now worth $10 of real value. The entire neighborhood was unraveling in real time, every person drowning in sudden, catastrophic poverty. And I was completely immune. I pulled out my phone again and opened a local grocery store delivery app on a whim, just to test the new world prices for myself. A full cart loaded with premium steak packs, organic fruits, imported wine, and luxury dessert items that would have easily cost $400 yesterday now displayed a total checkout price of exactly 4 cents. 4 cents. I could buy enough premium food to feed 100 people for an entire month for less than a single penny's old value. I scrolled further, clicking on real estate listings out of pure curiosity. A massive waterfront mansion in the most exclusive Miami gated community, complete with a private pool, home theater, and yacht dock, was listed at $125. A fully furnished downtown high-rise penthouse was $98. A commercial shopping mall spanning 3 city blocks was priced at $420. Everything was free for all practical purposes. Yet no one could truly take advantage of it. Everyone's money had crashed alongside the prices. People could technically afford a mansion now, but their bank balances had also depreciated 10,000 times over. A person who had $2,000 in savings yesterday now had 20 cents of real purchasing power. They couldn't buy anything, even with the new cheap prices. Only I could. Only I retained my original purchasing power. A sharp, bitter thought suddenly crossed my mind, cooling my excitement for a split second. Serena, my ex-girlfriend. She'd broken up with me just 3 days ago. Her exact words still echoed clearly in my head, cold and condescending, spoken right in this living room after I told her I planned to keep saving steadily instead of splurging on physical gold like she'd begged me to. Ethan, you're too safe, too boring, too poor. You save pennies for a future that'll never impress anyone. Real wealth is gold. Tangible assets, not useless bank numbers. Tristan Cross has actual money, actual status, actual gold reserves. He's the kind of man I deserve. She'd left me for Tristan Cross, a cocky local nouveau riche kid who flaunted his gold collections and flashy superficial wealth everywhere he went. She'd mocked my bank savings as meaningless digital numbers, claimed physical gold was the only true wealth, and abandoned our 2-year relationship for a fake rich guy with a shallow fortune. Now the world had flipped upside down. All of Tristan's flashy assets, his cars, his watches, his gold stacks, everything had depreciated 10,000 times over. His so-called real wealth was now worthless garbage. My so-called useless bank numbers were the only true, unshakable wealth left on the entire planet. A faint knock sounded at my front door, sharp and deliberate. I knew exactly who it was before I even opened it. The universe was handing me the most satisfying, most ironic comeback in history. The stage was set. The rules were rewritten. And my ex-girlfriend was about to witness the biggest mistake of her entire life. Section 2. I didn't rush to answer the door. Instead, I stood there for a long moment, letting the weight of this new reality sink in. The world had flipped on its head overnight. Every rule I'd ever known about money, status, and wealth had been incinerated. The boring, safe, digital savings Serena had mocked were now the only legitimate currency on Earth. Meanwhile, the physical gold she'd worshipped, the tangible assets she'd called real wealth, were nothing more than overpriced rock. The knock came again, louder this time, accompanied by a familiar, impatient voice. Ethan, I know you're in there. Open up. It was Serena. No warmth. No softness. Just the sharp, entitled tone she'd started using on me the second Tristan Cross slid into her Instagram DMs. I walked slowly to the front door, unlocked the deadbolt, and pulled it open. The sight that greeted me was almost comical in its contrast. Serena stood on my porch dressed in the designer outfit she'd bought with Tristan's money last week, her hair perfectly styled, a thin gold chain glinting around her neck. She'd always been gorgeous. But right now, her face was tight with anxiety, her eyes flicking past me into the house like she was searching for something to validate her crumbling worldview. And right beside her stood Tristan Cross. He was dressed in his usual flashy attire. A tight polo shirt with a luxury logo blazoned across the chest, designer sunglasses pushed up into his hair, and a thick, ostentatious gold bracelet wrapped around his wrist. The guy spent every waking moment trying to convince everyone he was old money. Before yesterday, it had worked. People envied him. People thought he was the definition of success. Now, he looked ridiculous. That gold bracelet he'd bragged cost $15,000 was now worth exactly $1.50. His entire identity, all his status symbols. Every single thing he'd used to feel superior to me was functionally worthless. Serena spoke first, her voice sharp and hurried, completely ignoring the awkward tension between us. Ethan, you must have seen the news. The economy crashed. Everything's worthless now. She leaned in slightly, her tone shifting from impatience to a fake, honeyed concern. I came to check on you. I knew you'd be panicking. You have all your money trapped in bank accounts. Right. All digital. It's all gone now. I feel so bad for you. I stared at her silently, letting her dig her own grave. She mistook my quietness for shock and despair, and her fake sympathy melted into thinly veiled condescension. I tried to warn you, she continued, shaking her head like she was disappointed in my poor life choices. Digital money is fake. It's just numbers on a screen. When the system crashes, it disappears. That's why I left you. That's why I chose Tristan. He understands real wealth. He holds physical assets. Gold doesn't crash. Ethan, not like your useless savings. Tristan stepped forward then, a smug, arrogant smirk plastered on his face. He puffed out his chest, tapping the gold bracelet on his wrist dramatically for emphasis. Sorry, man, hate to rub it in, but Serena's right. You got played by the system. All those years you spent saving every penny, living like a peasant, just to watch it vanish overnight. Meanwhile, I'm sitting on solid gold. My net worth is still intact. You're broke now. I'm still rich. He chuckled lowly, looking me up and down with obvious pity. Must suck to be you right now, waking up to find out your entire life's work was nothing but a waste. You had $1 million once. Right. Now you've got $100 of real value. That's poverty level in this new world. You'll be struggling to buy groceries by noon. Serena nodded in agreement, her expression turning cold and final. This is exactly why I couldn't stay with you. Ethan, you have no vision, no understanding of real finance. You're a loser who relies on the system. Tristan's a winner who secures his future with tangible wealth. This crash just proved I made the right choice. They tag-teamed me, confident, arrogant, absolutely convinced they were on the winning side of this global catastrophe. It was almost painful how wrong they were. I finally spoke, my voice calm, steady, lacking even a hint of the panic they expected. You think your gold is still valuable? Tristan laughed outright, a loud, mocking sound. Of course it is. Gold is universal. It holds value through every crash. While your fake bank money evaporated, my physical assets survived. I'm untouchable. I pulled out my phone, opened a precious metal trading website, and turned the screen toward them. Check the new market price. Tristan's smirk faltered slightly. He glanced down at the screen, his eyes scanning the numbers lazily at first, then freezing completely as his brain processed what he was seeing. Gold spot price. 0.0012 per ounce. His $15,000 gold bracelet was now worth less than a single penny. His jaw dropped open, his face drained of color in an instant, going from cocky confidence to ashen disbelief. That's impossible, he muttered, stumbling forward slightly. Gold doesn't drop like this. This is a glitch. It has to be a system error. It's not a glitch, I said flatly. Everything depreciated 10,000 times overnight. Your cars, your watches, your real estate. Your gold, all of it is worthless. You don't have any real wealth left. Tristan, you're broke. Serena's eyes widened in pure horror. She grabbed Tristan's arm tightly, her confident composure shattering instantly. What? What do you mean it's worthless? You told me gold was safe. You told me your assets were secure. Tristan was sweating now, scrambling for excuses, his earlier arrogance completely gone. It's temporary. The market will correct. This is just a Onady anomaly. Gold always bounces back. I shook my head slowly, delivering the final blow. The entire global economic system reset. There's no bouncing back. Every physical asset lost 99.99% of its value. Your so-called real wealth is garbage now. Their eyes darted to me, waiting to see me break into laughter. waiting for this to be a sick joke. But my face was completely serious. Serena's voice trembled as she asked the question she was terrified to hear the answer to. Then, what about you? If everything crashed, what do you have left? I tilted my head slightly, staring straight into her panicked eyes. My bank balance didn't change. For a full 3 seconds, they just stared at me blankly, unable to comprehend the words. What? Serena whispered. I pulled up my bank app again, turning the bright screen toward their faces, letting them stare directly at my unchanged 7-figure balance. I still have 1,027. 482. Exactly what I had before the crash. Tristan's body visibly stiffened. His eyes bulged like he was seeing a ghost. That's not possible. Everyone's money crashed. The system depreciated every account globally. No one's balance stays the same. I'm the exception, I replied simply. The silence that followed was deafening. They'd come here today to laugh at my misfortune, to rub my supposed poverty in my face, to validate Serena's terrible decision to leave me for a fake rich man. They'd strutted onto my porch full of superiority, convinced they were the winners of this new world. Instead, they just discovered they were the ones completely ruined. Serena's lips started trembling. She stared at my bank balance, then at the worthless gold around her neck, then back at me. Her expression morphing from arrogance to raw, desperate regret. Ethan. Her voice was soft, pleading now. I was wrong. I was so stupid. I didn't know. I had no idea this would happen. Can you forgive me? We can fix this. We can go back to how things were. I almost laughed out loud. Just 3 days ago, she'd called me boring, poor, and useless. She'd abandoned our 2-year relationship for a guy who flashed cheap gold trinkets. She'd mocked my financial discipline and called my life savings fake. Now that the world had reset and I was the only rich man alive, she wanted to crawl back. There's nothing to go back to, I said coldly. Tristan's face turned red with rage and humiliation. He couldn't stand seeing me elevated above him, couldn't stand the fact that the man he mocked as poor was now the most powerful person in the entire state. This is a scam, he snarled, pointing aggressively at my phone. You faked the balance. There's no way you retain full value. You're just trying to make us look stupid. I ignored his tantrum entirely, my gaze fixed solely on Serena. You left me because you thought tangible assets were superior to bank savings. You chose his gold over my future. Now your choice has backfired spectacularly. Serena's eyes welled up with tears, her perfect facade crumbling completely. I didn't know. No one knew this would happen. Ethan, please, I'm begging you, don't leave me behind. In this new world, everyone is broke. Only you have real money. I can't survive out there alone. Her desperation was palpable. She wasn't here for love. She was here for survival. She'd seen the neighborhood chaos. She'd watched everyone's wealth vanish. And she knew she was doomed unless she attached herself to the only constant fortune on the planet. But I'd already moved on. I'd spent years being loyal, patient, and dedicated to her, only to be discarded for superficial wealth. Now that the tables had turned, I had zero interest in taking her back. You made your choice, I said firmly. You wanted gold. You wanted status. You wanted a man who flaunts wealth instead of building it. Now you get to live with that choice. I stepped back and started closing the door. Serena lunged forward, hand shooting out to stop the door from shutting, panic exploding in her voice. Ethan, wait, please. I'll do anything. I'll apologize. I'll never doubt you again. Don't shut me out. Tristan grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her back, his face twisted with bitter resentment. Let him go. He's just a lucky loser with a glitch in his bank account. This won't last. The government will fix the economy. My wealth will come back. He was clinging to denial, refusing to accept the new reality, desperate to preserve his shattered pride. I looked at them one last time. At the crying, regretful ex-girlfriend and the furious, delusional fake rich kid, and felt absolutely nothing. They were no longer relevant to my life. They were relics of the old world. People who judged worth based on superficial status and worthless trinkets. In this new era, they were nothing. I slammed the door shut in their faces and twisted the lock. The second the door clicked closed, I heard Serena's desperate sobs echo from the porch, followed by Tristan's frustrated shouting as he futilely ranted about system errors and market corrections. I blocked out the noise and turned back to my laptop, a calm, clear resolve settling over me. The breakup that had stung me for days was now the funniest mistake in human history. Now it was time to stop dwelling on the past. Now it was time to explore the limitless power I held in this broken world. Section 3. After locking the door on Serena and Tr. Istan's pathetic display, I exhaled a long, slow breath and finally let myself relax. The lingering frustration from our breakup, the annoyance of their arrogant visit, and the shock of waking up to a broken global economy all melted away. In their place came a sharp, thrilling clarity I'd never felt in my entire ordinary life. The old rules were dead. The old hierarchy of wealth and status was incinerated, and I stood alone at the top of a brand new world no one understood yet. I walked back to my desk, pulled out my chair, and sat down in front of my laptop. The chaos outside my windows continued unabated. Sirens wailed in the distance. Neighbors shouted in panic. And sporadic car horns blared nonstop as people tried desperately to process the overnight economic apocalypse. Every single person in the city was drowning in sudden poverty, everyone except me. Before I indulged in any extravagant purchases or reckless spending sprees, I needed to fully understand the new rules of this collapsed economy. I needed to verify every detail, test every boundary, and confirm exactly how unshakable my system privilege truly was. Luck didn't make me powerful. Knowledge of this new world did. I started with the most basic, everyday purchases first. Just to ground myself in reality, I opened a mainstream American supermarket delivery platform. The same one I used weekly for groceries, and loaded a full premium cart. I added top-grade Angus beef ribeyes, imported Italian truffle pasta, organic exotic fruits, aged craft whiskey, gourmet seafood packs, and every luxury grocery item I'd never splurged on in my old frugal life. Back yesterday, this cart would have easily topped $600, a substantial grocery run for any single man. I tapped checkout. Final total: 0.06 cents, for enough high-end food to stock my entire fridge for 2 weeks. I stared at the number for a long moment, dumbfounded by the sheer absurdity of it all. The platform's system still functioned perfectly. No glitches, no errors. Just updated post-collapse pricing that rendered all consumer goods practically free. I completed the purchase instantly with my card, and the order was confirmed within 2 seconds. The delivery estimate read 8 minutes. In the old world, cheap prices meant low quality or discounts. In this world, cheap meant everything had lost 10,000 times its value, while my money retained every ounce of its original purchasing power. Encouraged, I moved on to bigger tests. I opened a national real estate listing website, browsing properties across Florida, starting from my local suburban neighborhood all the way up to the most exclusive ultra-luxury districts in Miami Beach and Star Island. The numbers on the screen were beyond surreal. A standard 3-bedroom, 2-bath suburban house, which had sold for $450,000 48 hours prior, was now listed at $45,000. A modern downtown high-rise penthouse with floor-to-ceiling ocean views, previously valued at $1.2 million, was priced at $120,000. A gated waterfront mansion with a private swimming pool, outdoor theater, guest house, and private yacht dock. Once a $9.8 million luxury estate reserved for multimillionaires was now available for $980,000 flat. I could buy 10 ultra-luxury mansions in the most prestigious neighborhood in Florida for less than $10,000 of my unchanged money. In the old world, that sum was pocket change. In this new world, it was enough to own an entire street of elite real estate. But real estate was just the beginning. I switched to a high-end automotive sales website, browsing brand new luxury vehicles straight from official dealership inventories. A brand new Tesla Model S Plaid, the fastest production electric car on the market, once retailing for $130,000, cost $13,000. A fully loaded Mercedes-Benz S-Class luxury sedan dropped from $110,000 to $11,000. A custom-built Ferrari F8 Tributo supercar, once a $290,000 dream machine, was priced at $29,000. Every vehicle, regardless of brand, performance, or luxury tier, was reduced to trivial change. The entire global automotive industry, once a trillion-dollar market, was now worth less than loose pocket change. Dealerships were still processing sales, contracts, and registrations normally. The systems worked flawlessly. Only the value of money had broken completely for everyone but me. I kept scrolling, pushing the boundaries further and further, testing just how far this universal price collapse extended. I found private yacht listings next. A 60-foot luxury cruising yacht, fully furnished with bedrooms, a kitchen, entertainment systems, and professional navigation equipment, once priced at $1.7 million, was listed for $170,000. Then came private islands, remote, fully titled private islands scattered across the Caribbean, previously selling for millions upon millions of dollars to Wall Street billionaires and Hollywood celebrities, were now priced between 3 cents and 12 cents apiece. 3 cents? For an entire private island. I laughed quietly to myself. A genuine, stunned laugh. Just yesterday, ordinary working people could never dream of owning so much as a square foot of private island land. Today, anyone with a handful of pre-collapse change could own paradise. The only problem: no one else had any valuable money left to buy them. Every regular person's bank balance had depreciated alongside the prices. A person who had $10,000 in savings before the crash now had exactly one worth of real purchasing power. They could technically afford a mansion or a supercar on paper, but their deflated balance left them unable to complete even the simplest purchase. The entire human race was trapped in a cruel economic paradox. Everything was cheap, yet everyone was broke. Except me. My fixed system balance meant I possessed full-value pre-collapse currency in a post-collapse world. Every dollar I spent carried 10,000 times the original force. I wasn't just a millionaire anymore. Adjusted for the new global purchasing power, I held over $10 billion of effective wealth. I was the sole billionaire on planet Earth. Untouchable. Unrivaled. Completely above every existing financial system. As I digested this reality, I flipped over to financial news outlets to watch the global meltdown unfold in real time. Federal economic officials were holding emergency live press conferences, their faces pale and sweating, voices shaking as they attempted to calm a panicking nation. Every expert admitted the same terrifying truth. There was no explanation, no logical market cause, no solution to reverse the collapse, no algorithm, no policy adjustment. No Federal Reserve intervention could fix what had happened. The global economy hadn't just crashed, it had been fundamentally erased and reset by an unknown, unstoppable force. Stock markets were frozen worldwide. All trading halted indefinitely. Retirement accounts, investment portfolios, trust funds, corporate assets all depreciated 10,000 times over. Billionaires who dominated global rankings yesterday were now technically impoverished. Middle-class families were wiped out entirely. The wealth gap that had existed for centuries had vanished overnight, replaced by a universal state of poverty for every human being alive. I scrolled through social media feeds, watching the public panic spiral out of control. Thousands of viral posts repeated the same desperate sentiments. Everyone's broke. Everything's free, but no one can buy anything. The world's money is broken. How do we survive? People were posting screenshots of their life savings reduced to pocket change, their mortgage balances rendered meaningless, their years of financial progress erased in a single night. Families were crying. Business owners were collapsing. Financial analysts were publishing apocalyptic warnings of total societal collapse. And through it all, I remained completely unaffected. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at my chaotic neighborhood, and thought back to Serena and Tristan's visit. They'd clung desperately to old-world ideas of wealth, physical gold, flashy material possessions, superficial status, completely blind to the fact that the rules that had validated their vanity were gone forever. They'd mocked my stable digital savings as fake and worthless, while worshipping tangible assets that had now turned to dust. Their arrogance, their judgment, their entire reason for abandoning me had been rendered meaningless in a single night. A faint system prompt flickered across my vision, subtle and clear. Host has completed new world rule verification. Full market fluctuation data recorded. System privilege confirmed. Host capital retains 100 original purchasing power permanently, unaffected by any global economic reset. No existing law, market mechanism, or national policy can override host's fixed asset status. I smiled to myself. There was no catch, no hidden downside, no time limit. I was permanently exempt from every economic rule that bound humanity. I was the only anchor in a world of total financial chaos. The grocery delivery arrived 8 minutes later, exactly as scheduled. I opened the door to find a stunned delivery driver staring blankly at his tablet, still struggling to process the fact that a $200 premium grocery order had cost mere pennies. He barely made eye contact, mumbled a confused thanks, and hurried back to his vehicle, clearly overwhelmed by the crumbling world around him. After putting away my groceries, I returned to my laptop, my mind already racing with possibilities. If houses, cars, yachts, and islands were practically free for me, what came next? What was the most extreme, most unthinkable purchase I could make in this broken economy? I browsed industrial equipment listings, corporate asset databases, international commodity trading platforms, and even government surplus sales. Every single category confirmed the same result: universal, 10,000-fold depreciation across the board. And then I saw it, a civilian aircraft sales portal, listing retired and decommissioned commercial airliners for private purchase. My eyes locked onto the listing instantly. Boeing 7478, a fully functional commercial airliner, $3,003 for a fully operational, airworthy jumbo jet that once cost $400 million to manufacture. My breath caught for half a second. This was no longer just buying a house or a supercar. This was crossing into a completely different level of wealth distortion. This was the purchase that would shatter every remaining limit of ordinary human understanding. The purchase that would expose my God-tier status in this new world and send shockwaves through the entire global system. I didn't hesitate. I clicked purchase. I entered my card details, confirmed my identity, and finalized the transaction in under 10 seconds. The screen flashed bright green. Purchase complete. Aircraft ownership transferred. Registration updated to Ethan Hale. In that moment, with a $3 transaction, I became the private owner of a full-size Boeing 747 jumbo jet. The quiet, ordinary life I'd lived was officially over. The era of my unstoppable, world-shaking wealth had officially begun. Section 4. The green confirmation pop-up burned bright on my laptop screen, sinking into my vision like a stamp marking the start of a brand new reality. I leaned forward, fingers hovering over the keyboard, still half expecting some kind of system error, some last-minute denial that would yank this absurd victory away from me. A Boeing 747, once the crown jewel of commercial aviation, a $400 million heavyweight jumbo jet reserved only for global airlines and billionaire conglomerates, was now legally Officially mine for $3 American. But no error popped up. No cancellation alert appeared. No fine print blocked my ownership. The system processed the transaction cleanly, instantly updating every legal database tied to the aircraft. I clicked through the attached official documents, scrolling through FAA registration forms, aircraft inspection reports, transfer of title certificates, and full airworthiness credentials. Every line was verified. Every signature digital and official. Every legal requirement fully satisfied. The plane was not some broken, decommissioned hunk of metal rotting in a desert boneyard. It was a fully functional, recently maintained Boeing 7478I, with valid flight clearance, full fuel system integrity, and 0 operational faults. $3. That was all it took. A low, genuine laugh burst out of my chest, sharp and disbelieving. I'd spent my entire adult life budgeting, calculating, pinching pennies to grow my savings slowly and steadily. I'd dreamed of financial freedom, of never worrying about rent or bills or unexpected expenses. I'd never once dared to imagine owning a private jet, let alone a massive commercial airliner capable of carrying 400 passengers across oceans. Now I owned one with loose change. The absurdity of it all was intoxicating. Before I could even process the full weight of my purchase, my phone exploded with notifications again. This time, it wasn't generic news alerts or neighborhood panic posts. It was tagged social media mentions, local news reposts, aviation forum shares, and dozens of frantic messages from people I barely knew. The quiet $3 purchase I just made was already leaking into the public sphere, and it was detonating like a nuclear bomb online. Curious, I opened the top trending hashtag blowing up nationwide. MNBYSBOING4 $3. It had already climbed to number 1 on all platform trends, overtaking every economic collapse headline, every panic post, every government emergency update. Tens of thousands of comments flooded in by the second, each one more shocked and disbelieving than the last. I scrolled through the chaotic feed, reading the raw, unfiltered shock of an entire nation struggling to comprehend what had happened. This can't be real. I just checked the aviation sales site myself. All planes are $3 to $20 now, but my bank won't let me spend anything. My money's worthless. I just saw the FAA database update. The plane's real. The registration's real. The owner's name is Ethan Hale, some random ordinary guy from Florida. Everyone's broke. Every asset's worthless. And one guy just bought a full-size jumbo jet for the price of a soda. What kind of glitch is this? I checked his transaction record. $3 exactly. No hidden fees. No leases. No payment plans. Full outright purchase. Panic and awe collided in every comment section. People were starting to realize the terrible, unthinkable truth I'd figured out hours earlier. This wasn't a universal free-for-all. This was a universal poverty trap for everyone except me. Ordinary citizens could look at million-dollar planes and mansions and islands all they wanted, but they're deflated. Worthless bank balances barred them from spending a single cent of real value. Only my account had retained its original purchasing power. Only I could exploit the broken economy to its absolute fullest extent. As the online chaos swelled, too frantic, incessant knocks slammed against my front door. Harder, faster, more desperate than the visit earlier that morning. I already knew who it was before I moved a muscle. I stood up slowly, walked to the door, and pulled it open without hesitation. Serena and Tristan stood on my porch, their earlier arrogance completely erased, replaced with utter, shell-shocked horror. Their faces were deathly pale, their eyes wide and unblinking, their hands trembling violently. They'd obviously seen the viral trend, seen the screenshots, seen the verified FAA registration update proving I owned a Boeing 747. Serena's eyes were glistening with tears, her perfect composure shattered entirely, her designer clothes, her gold necklace. Every status symbol she'd proudly chosen over me now looked pathetic and laughable in the face of my new reality. Tristan's jaw hung open, his earlier rage and denial evaporated into blank, stunned disbelief. The gold bracelet he'd bragged about, the physical wealth he'd claimed was superior to my digital savings, dangled uselessly on his wrist. Worthless garbage. They'd come here hours ago to mock my poverty, to celebrate their fake wealth, to congratulate themselves for leaving me in the dust. Now they stood before the most extraordinary display of wealth the new world had ever seen. "It's true," Serena whispered, her voice breaking, barely audible over the distant street chaos. "You actually bought a plane, a real Boeing jet, for $3. I nodded calmly, leaning against the doorframe, no longer angry, no longer hurt. I was simply watching two people who judged and discarded me confront the consequences of their own shallow stupidity. Yep, Tristan finally found his voice, but it was shaky, defeated, stripped of all its former cockiness. "That's impossible. No one's account stayed the same. The entire global system depreciated every balance. How do you still have real money?" "I'm different," I said simply. No need to explain the system. No need to justify my luck or my privilege. The results spoke for themselves. Serena stepped forward cautiously, her tone turning soft, pleading, desperate beyond measure. All her earlier pride was gone. replaced by pure regret. Ethan. I was wrong. So wrong. I messed up terrible. I thought gold was wealth. I thought digital savings were fake. I thought you were boring and unambitious. I didn't know you'd become this. She gestured weakly toward my phone. Toward the viral posts. Toward the jet I now owned. Tears spilling down her cheeks. Please forgive me. Let's fix this. I'll stay. I'll do anything. I'll never doubt you again. I'll never look at anyone else. Just don't leave me behind in this broken world. I stared at her tear-streaked face, at the genuine panic in her eyes, and felt absolutely zero sympathy. She hadn't loved me. She'd loved status, wealth, and material security. When I was ordinary, she discarded me. When I became the most powerful man on the planet, she begged to return. Her regret wasn't for hurting me. It was for ruining her own chance at an incomparable life of luxury. You made your choice, I repeated, my voice steady and unyielding. You chose gold over me. You chose Tristan's fake status over my stable future. You get to live with that choice. Tristan flinched like he'd been slapped. His face burned with humiliation, knowing every word I said was true. He'd spent months parading his trivial gold assets, mocking regular people like me, convincing Serena he was a real winner. Now he was the poorest kind of loser, a man who'd traded an unshakable fortune for worthless trinkets. You can't do this, he muttered bitterly. This is just a system glitch. It'll be fixed. The government will reset the economy. Your luck won't last. I smirked faintly at his desperate denial. Keep telling yourself that, Tristan, while you're at it. Keep staring at your worthless gold. I'll be over here buying airplanes, islands, and whatever else I want. Serena let out a broken sob, reaching for my arm, but I stepped back, shutting down any attempt at physical intimacy. Leave, I said flatly. I don't have time for regretful exes or delusional wannabe rich guys. They stood frozen on the porch for another 10 seconds, hopeless and defeated, before Tristan finally grabbed Serena's arm and dragged her away. Her quiet crying lingered in the air as they stumbled down my driveway. Two people whose entire worldview had been shattered in a single morning. I closed the door and locked it again, blocking out their misery completely. Outside, the online storm only grew wilder. Major local news stations began running live segments about my purchase, anchors sounding utterly baffled as they reported the impossible story. Financial experts were being interviewed live on air, all of them scrambling to explain why one random civilian had retained full monetary value while the entire globe collapsed into poverty. None of them had an answer. Economists who'd spent decades studying market trends and global finance models admitted live on camera that this situation defied every known law of economics. There was no algorithmic error, no regional glitch, no banking bug that could cause a single individual's assets to remain completely unaffected by a universal 10,000-fold depreciation. It was supernatural, unprecedented, unsolvable, and it was all mine. I returned to my laptop, refreshing the aircraft registration page one last time. My name remained firmly listed as the sole legal owner. The jet's operational status read fully airworthy, ready for pilot assignment and flight scheduling. I could legally fly it anywhere in the world tomorrow if I wanted. A new system prompt flickered across my vision. Crisp and rewarding. Landmark wealth purchase completed. First world-class asset acquisition recorded. Global attention level rising rapidly. Economic shockwave severity. Level 3. Further world-scale turbulence incoming. I smiled faintly, watching the prompt fade. I'd only spent $3, and I'd already sent the entire global economy trembling. The public was in chaos. Financial experts were stumped. My ex and her new boyfriend were broken and regretful. And this was only the beginning. If a $3 airplane could shake the world this hard, I couldn't even imagine what would happen when I started making bigger, bolder purchases. The era of ordinary life was dead. I was no longer just a survivor in a broken world. I was the new center of the world's economy, the sole rule breaker, the untouchable financial god of this new age. Section 5. The quiet calm inside my house stood in stark, insane contrast to the absolute chaos exploding across every corner of the internet and the streets outside. After shutting the door on Serena and Tristan's pathetic, regretful breakdown, I settled back into my desk chair, my fingers brushing the laptop keyboard as I watched my $3 Boeing 747 purchase spiral from a local viral trend into a global phenomenon in real time. In less than 20 minutes, the hashtag #MANBYSBUING for $3 had blown past national trends and locked in as the #1 topic worldwide, dominating every social platform, every news feed, every discussion forum on the planet. What started as a bizarre local Florida story had mutated into the single biggest economic mystery in modern human history, and every pair of eyes online was now glued to my name, my face, and the impossible miracle I'd stumbled upon. I scrolled through international comment sections, watching shock ripple across every country and every continent. European users posted screenshots of their own bank balances, all reduced to worthless fractions of a cent, begging for answers. Asian financial forums erupted with frantic debates over whether the global economic reset was a cosmic error or a controlled system experiment. Australian and Canadian netizens shared identical frustrations. Every asset on Earth was cheap beyond belief. Yet not a single ordinary person could afford to buy a single thing of value. Everyone was uniformly destitute. Everyone except me. News outlets from London, Tokyo, Paris, and Sydney scrambled to push emergency special reports, all running the same headline. One American civilian retains full pre-collapse wealth, acquires commercial jet for pennies. The entire world was watching me. What made the spectacle even more satisfying was the complete and total public annihilation of Tristan Cross's fake wealthy persona. Within minutes of my Boeing purchase going viral, local Florida social media accounts began digging up every clip, every photo, every arrogant statement Tristan had made over the past year. The internet had always been ruthless about tearing down fake elites, and today, they had the perfect excuse to burn his reputation to the ground. Old videos resurfaced instantly. Videos of him flaunting his gold collections at rooftop parties, bragging about how physical tangible assets were the only true wealth. Clips of him mocking regular working-class people, calling savers with bank accounts foolish and short-sighted. Screenshots of his Instagram captions, where he'd repeatedly claimed digital money was fake and gold was eternal security. Every single word now looked hilariously idiotic. Thousands of local users flooded his old posts with mocking comments, turning his once glamorous profile into a public humiliation thread. Dude spent thousands on gold to become poorer than a homeless person. Mocked bank savers while the only rich man alive saved in banks. Peak irony. His entire personality was I own gold so I'm successful. Now his gold's worth less than a gumdrop. He stole the guy's girlfriend to flex fake wealth, and now he's the poorest loser in the entire state. The comments piled up faster than anyone could delete them. Tristan's carefully built identity as a young, successful, asset-smart elite crumbled completely in front of the entire local community. All the respect, all the envy, all the social status he'd spent months cultivating vanished overnight, replaced with unending mockery and pity. I refreshed his profile and watched as his follower count plummeted. Hundreds unfollowing him every second, while hate comments and meme edits flooded every post. He wasn't a wealthy playboy anymore. He was the universal face of foolish financial arrogance. A cautionary tale the entire internet was laughing at. And Serena was dragged right down with him. Local gossip pages quickly uncovered their relationship timeline, exposing how she dumped me mere days before the global collapse specifically to chase Tristan's goal-based wealth. Screenshots of her old texts mocking my useless digital savings leaked out, spreading like wildfire across every local group chat and social page. Public opinion shifted instantly. Where people once thought she was a beautiful, ambitious woman chasing a better life, they now saw her as a shallow, gold-digging opportunist who'd made the worst decision in modern history. She'd abandoned a genuine, stable man with unbreakable future wealth for a flashy fake rich guy whose entire net worth had dissolved into thin air. Comments targeting her were just as relentless. She picked worthless gold over a guy who now owns airplanes for pocket change. Biggest L ever. Imagine dumping a future trillionaire for a broke kid with cheap gold bracelets. She's begging for forgiveness 5 hours after breaking up with him. No dignity at all. I watched the public backlash unfold with calm detachment. I didn't need to humiliate them personally. The new world, the new economic rules, and their own terrible choices were doing all the work for me. Every mock, every criticism, every viral meme was just the universe correcting their shallow judgment and arrogant condescension toward me. About half an hour later, my phone lit up with a flood of private calls and texts from old friends, coworkers, and distant acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to reach out. Everyone wanted to ask questions. Everyone wanted to cozy up to the only rich man on the planet. I ignored every single one of them. I'd spent my whole life being overlooked, being the quiet, ordinary guy while flashy, arrogant people like Tristan soaked up attention and status. Now that the tables had turned, I had no interest in suddenly playing the role of everyone's new best friend. I didn't need their admiration, their connections, or their fake niceties. I had a system that made me infinitely more powerful than any social status or human connection could ever make me. While my phone continued buzzing nonstop, I switched my focus back to global economic news. And that was when I realized the situation was escalating far beyond simple internet virality. Wall Street official channels posted emergency shutdown notices. All remaining market trading activity was officially suspended indefinitely. The New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, every major global exchange had frozen completely, unable to function under the impossible 10,000-fold depreciation. Trillions upon trillions of global market value had vanished in a single night, leaving the entire international financial system in a state of total paralysis. Federal Reserve officials held a second emergency press conference, their expressions far more panicked than the first round of announcements. They admitted publicly that all economic recovery models had failed. Every traditional solution, market corrections, stimulus injections, asset rebalancing, inflation adjustments, was completely useless against this unprecedented universal value reset. The entire global financial system was broken beyond repair, and I was the only anomaly disrupting the ruins of the old world. Financial analysts on live TV began openly stating what everyone was already suspecting. My fixed bank balance was not a glitch, not a bug, not a temporary error. It was a unique, individual immunity to the universal economic collapse. I was the only human being on Earth unaffected by the greatest financial disaster in human history. As the live broadcast continued, the anchors suddenly shifted their tone from confused analysis to serious urgency. Sources within the U.S. Department of Economic Affairs have confirmed active investigation into the unidentified individual retaining full pre-collapse asset value. Federal officials are prioritizing Locaton G and interviewing Ethan Hale, the Florida resident who acquired a Boeing 747 for $3 U.S. Economic experts confirm this single private transaction has created unquantifiable structural damage to global market stability. I raised an eyebrow at the screen. My $3 plane purchase wasn't just going viral. It was actively breaking the global economy. Before this, the world's economic depreciation had been uniform. A flat 10,000-fold drop across every asset, every account, every commodity. The system was broken. But it was evenly broken for every person on the plain 10 equal state of universal poverty that maintained a fragile, terrible balance. But my transaction destroyed that balance entirely. I'd injected full-value pre-collapse purchasing power into a post-collapse zero-value market. I'd completed a legal, verified transaction that defied every active economic rule, creating an unprecedented value paradox no government or economist could explain or contain. The fragile dead balance of the global economy was officially shattered because of me. I leaned back in my chair, processing the new stakes. It was no longer just personal satisfaction. No longer just petty revenge on my ex and her fake rich boyfriend. My existence alone was now rewriting the rules of global finance, shaking governments, freezing markets, and forcing the entire world to confront an impossible new reality. Down the street, I spotted Serena and Tristan lingering on the sidewalk, not leaving, not daring to approach my door again. They stood there motionless, defeated and isolated, watching my house like beggars staring at a palace they could never enter. Tristan's head was hung low, his arrogant swagger completely gone. He'd lost his social status, his reputation, his perceived wealth, and his pride all in one morning. Every person in our local circle now knew he was a fraud, a fool who'd traded greatness for worthless trinkets. Serena stood beside him, tears still streaking her face, her eyes locked firmly on my front door. She wasn't crying for Tristan, wasn't crying for her lost status. She was crying for the life of unlimited luxury she'd stupidly thrown away. She'd walked away from the only untouchable fortune on the planet for a man who now had less real wealth than a homeless beggar. Their downfall was complete, public, and irreversible. I turned my gaze away from them, no longer wasting a single second of my attention on their trivial misery. The small-scale personal revenge was over. The real, world-changing game had only just begun. If a simple $3 plane purchase was enough to crash global market balance and trigger federal investigation, I could only imagine how drastically my next moves would reshape human civilization entirely. Section 6. The words from the live news broadcast lingered in the air like a heavy, unshakable verdict, sinking deep into my thoughts as I stared fixedly at the frozen stock market graphs plastered across my laptop screen. Red and green lines that once dictated the fortune and ruin of billions sat completely static, locked in place the second my $3 Boeing 747 transaction cleared the global asset database. What I'd initially thought was a funny, iconic flex to crush my ex and her delusional new boyfriend had snowballed into something far bigger, far more terrifying, and infinitely more powerful. My impulsive, casual purchase hadn't just gone viral across social media or embarrassed a few arrogant locals. It had single-handedly fractured the last fragile backbone of the entire global economic system, tearing apart a uniform worldwide poverty state and birthing a chaotic, unsolvable financial paradox that no government, no economist, no authoritative body on the entire planet could begin to explain, regulate, or repair. Before I clicked that purchase button, the world's economy was undeniably dead, yet eerily stable. Every single asset class on Earth, real estate, commodities, stocks, bonds, precious metals, commercial goods, luxury items, and raw resources had depreciated exactly 10,000 times over in that unexplained overnight reset. Every personal bank account, every corporate fund, every national reserve had fallen in lockstep with the universal value drop. No ordinary civilian retained any functional purchasing power whatsoever. No one could exploit the absurdly broken prices to gain wealth, because every person's money had collapsed right alongside the market. Humanity was drowning in universal, equal hopeless poverty, but there was no imbalance, no loophole, no anomaly to trigger further systemic breakdown. It was a bleak, suffocating, hopeless equilibrium. But an equilibrium all the same, one that global financial institutions were desperately clinging to in order to buy time for a potential recovery plan. I destroyed that decades-long financial equilibrium in exactly 10 seconds. I was the only person alive in possession of legitimate, unaltered, pre-collapse full-value currency. while every human being's money had diluted into worthless digital and physical scraps overnight. My sister-bound bank balance remained completely untouched, retaining every ounce of its original purchasing power. When I legally and officially purchased a $400 million commercial jumbo jet for merely $3 post-collapse dollars, I created an irreversible value contradiction that shredded every remaining economic model. Every market formula, every risk assessment framework that economists and financial analysts had relied on for over a century. The global economic system was built to process universal market shifts, inflation, deflation, recessions, and even catastrophic depressions, but it could never process a single individual holding effectively infinite purchasing power inside a completely worthless global market. My existence alone broke every rule the modern financial world was built upon. I leaned forward, my elbows resting on my desk, and refreshed the global financial monitoring dashboard I'd pulled up earlier, and the updated real-time numbers were nothing short of apocalyptic. Global commodity market volatility had spiked to an unprecedented, record-breaking 99.9. A number so extreme it rendered all market data functionally useless. All standardized international currency exchange rates had collapsed entirely. Every USDTOUR, USDTOYN, and cross-border pairing rendered meaningless and untradeable. Gold, once the universal safe haven asset that anchored global wealth, flatlined at a fraction of a cent per ounce. Crude oil, natural gas, industrial minerals, prime real estate, blue-chip stock indices, and every industrial commodity that had guided global trade, national economies, and international diplomacy for centuries was now unmeasurable, unquantifiable, and completely untethered from any logical value scale humanity had ever established, one after another. Central banks across every major nation issued emergency total freeze orders within minutes of my jet purchase going public. The Federal Reserve, European Central Bank, Bank of Japan, Bank of England, and every top-tier global financial institution simultaneously halted all fund transfers, asset valuations, trade settlements, market audits, and reserve adjustments. Their algorithmic systems could not reconcile my transaction, could not validate how a $3 payment could legally acquire a $400 million asset, could not reverse the record, and could not categorize the anomaly. With no way to explain or contain the chaos I'd created, every global financial authority chose to shut down the entire global financial network entirely. A desperate last-ditch attempt to contain the irreversible damage rippling across every corner of the planet. Watching the entire global financial order grind to a halt from the quiet comfort of my suburban Miami bedroom felt utterly surreal, bordering on dreamlike. Just yesterday, I was nothing more than an ordinary, overlooked former office worker, stuck in a monotonous 9-to-5 routine, saving pennies to secure a stable future, with no political power, no corporate influence, no global connections, and no special status whatsoever. Yet one casual, impulsive purchase made from my desk, fueled by nothing more than petty satisfaction and curiosity, had single-handedly paralyzed the combined financial authority of every country, every central bank, and every economic governing body on planet Earth. I switched over to multiple live international press streams simultaneously, tuning into American, European, and Asian news networks, and the overwhelming sense of universal panic was impossible to ignore. Professional journalists, economic anchors, and field reporters who'd covered every major financial crisis in modern history were visibly shaken, their practiced professional composure completely shattered by the unfolding disaster. A senior European economic correspondent spoke in a shaky, unsteady tone during a live cross from London, his voice cracking slightly as he addressed the camera. We are witnessing the total, irreversible collapse of the modern global economic order. For the first time in recorded human history, there are no functional market rules, no stable value benchmarks, no operable trade systems. All asset values are arbitrary, all standardized currency is void, and one unidentified individual's unique financial immunity has rendered every global economic regulation, law, and policy completely obsolete. There is no historical precedent, no mathematical model, no government solution, and no recovery plan capable of fixing this catastrophe. A veteran Tokyo financial analyst went even blunter during his live segment, his tone tight with urgent gravity. Abandoning all corporate diplomacy to state the unvarnished truth, the world economy no longer exists in any functional capacity. What we are observing right now is not a recession, not a depression, not a market crash. It is the complete and total erasure of every value system humanity has built for centuries. The only functional, valid, purchasable capital on the entire planet belongs to a single ordinary American civilian. Every global economic strategy, every national reserve policy, every international trade agreement built over the past 100 years is now completely useless. While elite financial experts scrambled, debated, and futilely analyzed the unprecedented crisis on live television, ordinary civilian society was unraveling faster by the minute, spiraling into mass chaos and desperation across every inhabited continent. With all global market activity fully frozen, every local business and civilian economic cycle collapsed instantly. Grocery store chains could no longer process any form of payment, leaving shelves stocked with food that no one could legally purchase. Gas stations shut down their pumps entirely, halting all transportation fuel distribution. Retail chains, restaurants, service industries, and small family businesses locked their doors permanently, terminating millions of jobs overnight. People had no way to earn income, no valid way to spend what little worthless money they held, and no possible method to gauge the value of anything they owned or desperately needed to survive. The basic daily economic cycle that had sustained human civilization for generations had broken entirely, leaving society hanging by a thread. Mass panic flooded the streets of every major American city and global metropolis. Crowds gathered in downtown plazas and financial districts, erupting into chaotic protests that had no target government or specific policy to blame. People screamed, cried, rioted, and pleaded for answers. Consumed by the brutal cosmic unfairness of the new reality, every hardworking family's decades of savings, every student's careful investments, every retiree's lifelong pension, every entrepreneur's business growth, every sacrifice humanity had made for financial security had been completely erased overnight. Meanwhile, one random, ordinary man retained every single ounce of his original wealth for no logical, explainable reason. Social media devolved rapidly from initial shock speculation into unbridled global hysteria. Every platform overwhelmed by billions of posts flooding servers to their limits. New viral hashtags exploded to the top of global trending lists every few seconds, dominating every region's algorithm. Global economy dead. One man trillionaire. World value reset. Ethan Hale break the world. The only rich man alive. Millions upon millions of posts flooded every corner of the internet, ranging from desperate confusion and terrified speculation to awestruck disbelief and growing resentment. Netizens dissected my identity, my background, my mysterious immunity, and my future intentions, theorizing endlessly about what I would do next and how my existence would reshape humanity's future. He didn't just buy a planet, he single-handedly broke the entire global economic system. Every government and central bank on Earth is completely powerless because of one random guy's bank account. If he spends more money on large assets, what other global systems will collapse entirely? He's the only rich man alive. He single-handedly controls the entire global economy now. The general public was finally starting to understand the terrifying, world-altering truth that even top experts hesitated to state openly. I was no longer just a lucky ordinary individual who'd stumbled onto a financial loophole. I was the new, unshakable center of the entire global economic order. Every future market shift, every government policy decision, every international trade negotiation, and every global financial move would now revolve entirely around me and my actions. Right as online global chaos reached its absolute peak, official federal emergency alerts began popping up simultaneously on every active phone, tablet, computer, and smart device across the entire United States. These were no ordinary news notifications, they were priority national emergency alerts, bypassing all social media algorithms and carrier restrictions, sent directly from the U.S. Department of the Treasury and the newly activated Federal Economic Task Force. Urgent National Alert. Federal Economic Task Force has launched full-scale nationwide investigation into anomalous asset holder Ethan Hale. All local law enforcement units instructed to establish full perimeter monitoring, provide discreet protective detail, and await official high-level contact protocols. All civilian parties are strictly prohibited from approaching, harassing, interfering with, or attempting to leverage the targeted individual. I raised an eyebrow slightly at the carefully worded government alert, catching the critical detail immediately. Protect, not arrest. Monitor, not detain. Observe, not interrogate. The federal government was not coming for me. They were coming to secure me, to study my unexplainable financial immunity, to protect me from public hysteria and foreign interference, and to desperately figure out how to contain the unprecedented global economic chaos I'd single-handedly unleashed. Every high-ranking official in Washington understood the stakes perfectly. I was the only source of valid, functional wealth left on the entire planet. To anger me, detain me, or restrict me in any way would mean severing the last remaining anchor of global economic stability, dooming the world to permanent financial oblivion. Less than 10 seconds after the national alert finished broadcasting, I heard distant sirens cutting sharply through the neighborhood's residual panic noise, growing steadily louder, closer, and more distinct with every passing second. A convoy of official vehicles slowly turned onto my quiet suburban street, rolling forward with deliberate, cautious precision. Multiple unmarked black federal SUVs with tinted windows led the formation, followed by a marked local sheriff's patrol car for civilian crowd control, and a large plainclothes task force van with no external logos, plates, or identifying markings whatsoever. This was no SWAT raid, no criminal apprehension operation, no standard police response. It was a high-stakes, classified diplomatic-level operation, designed to approach the most valuable, most important human anomaly on the planet with extreme caution and maximum discretion. In an instant, the entire noisy neighborhood fell dead silent. Every resident who'd been shouting, panicking, arguing, and rushing through the streets froze in place. All eyes locked on the federal convoy converging exclusively on my modest two-bedroom rental house. The air thickened with tension and unspoken awe as everyone realized exactly what was happening. The federal government's full attention was centered solely on me. Down the concrete sidewalk at the end of my driveway, Serena and Tristan stood completely frozen, their bodies rigid with pure, unadulterated shock. They'd lingered there for over an hour after I'd shut them out, clinging to a pathetic, desperate hope that I'd soften up, forgive their betrayal, and let them cling to my coattails in this broken, hopeless new world. But now they watched in utter disbelief as the full weight of the United States federal government descended on my doorstep, proving beyond any shadow of a doubt that I was no longer just their ordinary ex-boyfriend. No longer just a random local guy from their neighborhood. I was a national top priority asset, a global supernatural anomaly, the single most important person alive on planet Earth. Tristan's broad shoulders slumped forward in complete, irreversible defeat. Every last shred of his arrogant pride, his fake wealthy status, and his self-assured superiority crumbled away to nothing. The social gap between us was no longer the simple old-world divide of rich versus poor, successful versus ordinary. It was an insurmountable chasm between a trivial, irrelevant human nobody and a world-shaking, rule-defying powerhouse who single-handedly dictated global economic fate. Serena's delicate, made-up face crumpled into fresh, silent tears. Her body slumping in helpless despair, she stood there trembling, staring at my house through blurred vision, fully comprehending the irreversible mistake she'd made. She'd abandoned a loyal, stable, far-sighted man who'd quietly built unshakable wealth for a shallow, arrogant fake playboy whose entire net worth had dissolved into worthless dust. She'd traded an infinite future of god-tier wealth, power, and status for cheap gold trinkets and empty vanity. Her last chance at redemption, at clinging to any semblance of privilege in this new world, was gone forever. She was nothing more than a powerless spectator, forced to watch my meteoric, world-changing rise from the cold, hopeless sidelines. I slowly stood up from my desk, my movements calm, steady, and unrushed, devoid of any nervousness or fear. I walked casually across my living room to the front bay window, parting the curtain slightly to peer out at the federal convoy lining up neatly along my front yard curb. Dozens of plainclothes agents and uniformed officers exited their vehicles, standing at attention in a disciplined perimeter formation, their eyes fixed firmly on my window, waiting patiently for further instruction from their superiors. A crisp, translucent news system prompt flickered gently across my field of vision, cold, mechanical, and authoritative, marking the official escalation of my global influence and the next stage of my world domination. Host economic influence upgraded to Tier 4. National collapse. Global market balance permanently fractured. No human intervention, policy adjustment, or national strategy can restore the old economic order. Official government intervention initiated. Host has become the core focus of global economic governance and international intelligence monitoring. Further large-scale asset purchases will trigger cross-border international political shockwaves and reshape global power structures. A faint, confident smile tugged at the corner of my mouth as the system prompt faded away. Breaking the entire global economic system with a trivial $3 plane purchase had only been the very beginning. The full force of the United States federal government was now on my doorstep. The entire world's eyes were glued to my every move, and the old rules of money, status, power, and global hierarchy were dead and buried forever. If one tiny, casual transaction was enough to shatter centuries of global financial order and paralyze every nation on Earth, I could only begin to imagine the earth-shaking chaos and world-level transformation that would unfold when I decided to make a purchase bold enough to shake the entire international political order to its core. The game was no longer local, no longer personal, no longer limited to petty revenge and personal wealth. It was global, political, high stakes, and infinitely more thrilling than any ordinary life I could have ever imagined. The world was waiting for my next move and I was fully ready to rewrite history. Section 7. The quiet hum of my home air conditioner was the only sound inside my house. A stark contrast to the suffocating tension brewing just beyond my front lawn. Outside, the federal perimeter held absolute discipline. Dozens of agents stood motionless. No one speaking, no one moving an inch without explicit orders. They did not draw weapons, did not advance toward my door, and made no attempt to breach my personal space. Every action was calculated, restrained, and revered the careful posture of a powerful government facing an entity it could not control, could not threaten, and dared not offend. I stood behind the thin curtain of my bay window, my gaze sweeping over the entire convoy with unwavering calm. There were no SWAT teams, no riot gear, no aggressive tactical units. Every personnel deployed here was plainclothes, specialized, handpicked from the Federal Economic Task Force, a newly assembled elite division created solely to handle my unprecedented anomaly. Washington had wasted zero time mobilizing its most discreet, high-ranking assets. fully aware that standard law enforcement protocols were completely useless in the face of my world-altering status. Down the street, the neighborhood crowd lingered at a safe distance, held back by a single sheriff's patrol unit. Ordinary residents stood huddled together, whispering in hushed, terrified tones, their eyes locked firmly on my home. Just hours earlier, I was simply the quiet, reserved guy who kept to himself, worked a regular office job, and lived a mundane, unremarkable life in their suburban community. Now I was the center of a national emergency, the sole focus of federal scrutiny, the man who had single-handedly collapsed the entire global economy. The shift in their perception was palpably a mix of raw fear, and disbelief that hung thick in the muggy Florida air. And at the edge of the crowd, Serena and Tristan remained rooted to the sidewalk, frozen in their defeat. They no longer dared to glance toward my window, too ashamed to meet my eyes. Every passing second amplified the stupidity of their earlier arrogance and desperation. Tristan's chest rose and fell with ragged, unstable breaths, his earlier rage and denial completely replaced by hollow, crushing helplessness. Without his fake gold wealth, without the status he'd spent months fabricating, he was nothing, just another broke, powerless kid drowning in the universal poverty that now consumed every human being except me. Serena's tears had stopped falling, but her face remained streaked with damp trails, her expression hollow and lifeless. She stood rigid, her perfect designer outfit now looking garish and ridiculous, a meaningless costume in a world that had discarded all old vanity and status. She had traded a future of infinite power and unrivaled wealth for empty charm and worthless physical assets, and now she was trapped to watch the consequences unfold with no way to reverse her choice. Regret saturated every inch of her body, heavy and unescapable. I tore my gaze away from their pitiful display, no longer deriving any satisfaction from their downfall. Petty revenge was trivial now. The game had escalated far beyond personal grudges. The entire world's economic fate rested on my next decision, and every power on the planet was waiting with bated breath to see what I would do. After 2 full minutes of silent perimeter standby, a single black unmarked SUV slowly inched forward, separating itself from the convo. It rolled to a gentle stop directly in front of my driveway, engine shutting off completely. The silence that followed was absolute, every agent on site holding their breath, every civilian spectator falling utterly quiet. The driver's door opened, and a middle-aged woman stepped out. She was impeccably dressed in a sharp, tailored formal blazer and slacks. No uniform, no badge, no visible firearm. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her features calm, composed, and authoritative, carrying the quiet gravitas of a senior federal official. There was no stiffness of law enforcement, no harsh tactical demeanor, only the polished, careful restraint of a high-level diplomat sent to negotiate with a one-neo-faken national anomaly. I recognized her instantly from recent financial emergency broadcasts. Elaine Voss, newly appointed Chief Director of the Federal Economic Stabilization Task Force, the top-ranking official in the United States overseeing the global economic collapse crisis. She was the government's most senior expert in anomalous market behavior, international financial policy, and crisis containment, handpicked by the Treasury Secretary and approved directly by the White House. If the government was sending her personally to my doorstep instead of low-level agents or local authorities, it meant they viewed me not as a civilian, not as a suspect, but as an independent sovereign and Titian equal, if not superior, power capable of rewriting global economic rules at will. Elaine Voss moved slowly and deliberately up my driveway, her steps measured and non-threatening. She kept her hands visible at all times, palms slightly out, a universal gesture of peace and submission designed to eliminate any trace of hostility or threat. She stopped exactly 3 feet from my front door, maintaining a respectful distance, never once attempting to advance or intrude on my private space. She spoke in a steady, calm, unrushed voice, loud enough for me to hear clearly through the thin wooden door, yet soft enough to avoid triggering any sense of confrontation. Mr. Hale, my name is Elaine Voss, Chief Director of the Federal Economic Stabilization Task Force. I am here on direct authorization from the United States Treasury and the Executive Office. I come unarmed, unaccompanied, and entirely without hostile intent. I request only 10 minutes of your time for a voluntary, confidential conversation. No pressure, no obligations, no follow-up actions of any kind will be taken based on your decision. Her words were perfectly chosen, masterfully calculated to de-escalate tension and honor my absolute authority. She did not demand entry, did not request cooperation, did not threaten investigation or legal action. She begged for my time, treated my willingness to speak with her as a privilege, not a civic duty. This was the ultimate proof of my new status. Ordinary citizens were summoned, interrogated, ordered, and compelled to comply with federal requests. I was negotiated with, respected, and cautiously appealed to as an independent power capable of collapsing nations with a single transaction. I stood in place for another long moment, processing the weight of this new reality. The highest levels of the United States government were bowing to my unspoken authority. The centuries-old global economic order had crumbled beneath my feet. Every elite, Every expert, every powerful figure on the planet was powerless before my unique system granted privilege. I finally stepped forward, reached out, and twisted the front door handle, pulling the door open slowly. Bright daylight flooded into my dim living room, illuminating the space between me and Elaine Voss. She lifted her gaze to meet mine directly, her expression professional, respectful, and faintly cautious but not fearful. She understood better than anyone the sheer magnitude of my power and the catastrophic consequences of misstepping in this conversation. "Come in," I said simply, my voice flat and unyielding. No warmth, no hostility, just absolute neutral authority. Elaine Voss nodded slightly in acknowledgement, a subtle, respectful gesture that no federal official would ever offer an ordinary civilian. She stepped across my threshold slowly, carefully, as if entering a sacred space rather than a regular suburban rental home. The second she crossed into my house, every agent outside tightened their formation, their vigilance spiking instantly. Yet none dared to follow or intrude. I closed the door behind her, shutting out the entire world, the staring neighbors, the lingering defeated exes, the armed federal perimeter, the global chaos unfolding beyond my walls. Now it was just me and the highest-ranking economic official in the country, alone in my living room, about to negotiate the future of the broken global economy. Elaine stood politely in the center of my living room, her gaze sweeping casually over my ordinary furniture, my basic home decor, my mundane suburban lifestyle. There was no judgment in her eyes, no disbelief that the most powerful economic entity on earth lived in such a modest home. She understood perfectly well that my power was not tied to material possessions, status, or background. It was tied to a supernatural, unbreakable privilege no human law or power could ever replicate. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, Mr. Hale," she began formally, her tone steady and sincere. "I'll keep this brief to respect your privacy. The federal government, along with every allied nation in the G7, is currently operating under a single, universal emergency directive. Understand your anomaly, stabilize the fractured global market, and prevent total societal collapse worldwide." I crossed my arms over my chest, leaning casually against the wall, my posture relaxed and unpressured. "You want to study me. You want to figure out why my money didn't collapse while every other asset on the planet turned worthless." Elaine did not attempt to lie, sugarcoat, or obscure the truth. She nodded firmly, acknowledging the reality openly. "That is partially correct. But more importantly, Mr. Hale, we need to understand your intentions. Your $3 Boeing purchase shattered the last stable equilibrium of the global economy. Every subsequent large-scale transaction you make will reshape international value structures, trigger political shifts, and determine whether humanity spirals into permanent anarchy or rebuilds a new functional economic system." She paused for a beat, her gaze locking steadily onto mine. "You are no longer a private citizen, Ethan, whether you choose to accept it or not. You are now a global public utility. The entire world's survival hinges on your choices." A faint, amused smirk tugged at my lips as I processed her words. Public utility. The government had finally put a formal label on my status. They could not control me, could not regulate me, could not limit me, so they were forced to beg for my cooperation, to treat me as a critical global resource that must be protected, appeased, and negotiated with. "And what exactly does the government want from me?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. Elaine Voss took a slow, careful breath, her tone shifting to unvarnished candor, dropping all bureaucratic formality. "Restraint, temporary restraint. Right now, every nation on Earth is in free fall. Markets are frozen, supply chains are broken. Civilian society is unraveling by the hour. If you continue executing landmark high-value purchases at this stage, acquiring aircraft, mansions, private islands, corporate assets, you will create irreversible value disparities that will incite global riots, collapse remaining governance structures, and trigger international resource wars." She leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering with urgent gravity. "We are asking you, on behalf of every government on the planet, to pause large-scale spending temporarily, give global authorities 72 hours to establish new emergency economic frameworks, rewrite international value standards, and stabilize civilian panic. In return, the United States federal government is prepared to offer you full, unconditional legal immunity for every transaction past, present, and future. No regulation, no tax audit, no asset seizure, no legal restriction will ever apply to you. You will be exempt from every financial law on the books, permanently." The offer was beyond staggering. The United States was officially surrendering its entire regulatory authority over me, voluntarily stripping itself of all power to govern my wealth, my purchases, or my finances. They were handing me complete, legal, infinite financial freedom with zero strings attached, simply to buy a few days of stability for a crumbling world. I stared at her silently, letting the weight of the offer sink in, watching as she waited patiently for my response, fully aware that I held all the power in this negotiation. After a long beat of tense silence, I finally spoke, my voice calm and unshakable. "I'll consider your request. Elaine's shoulders visibly relaxed. A flicker of profound relief crossing her face. It was clear my tentative agreement was the best outcome the government could have possibly hoped for. Thank you, Mr. Hale. That is more than we could ask for. I cut her off sharply, my tone turning cold and authoritative, leaving no room for argument. But I don't negotiate for free. If the government wants my restraint to save the global economy, you're going to pay the price for it. Elaine's eyes narrowed slightly, alert and cautious. What are your terms? I pushed off the wall, standing upright, my gaze sharp and unyielding as I laid out my demands. Fully aware that the entire global economic future rested on my every word. First, full official diplomatic recognition of my independent asset status. No government agency, no international body, no law enforcement unit will ever monitor, investigate, or question my spending or my assets ever again. Second, immediate federal clearance and legal validation for every asset I have purchased and will purchase in the future, including my Boeing 747, full airworthiness certification, private flight authorization, and unrestricted global flight access. Third, I continued, my tone dropping with unmissable finality, you will permanently remove all federal monitoring and civilian restriction orders targeting me. My privacy is absolute. My authority is absolute. And my power is non-negotiable. Elaine Voss stood frozen for several seconds, processing my non-negotiable terms. There was no greed in my demands, no trivial flexibly absolute dominance. Establishing my unrivaled authority over every global system that once ruled ordinary citizens like me. Finally, she nodded slowly. Firmly, I have full White House and Treasury authorization to accept all three terms on the spot. They are approved effective immediately. A new system prompt flashed across my vision, bright and definitive, marking my official elevation beyond all national and global jurisdiction. Host has secured official global sovereign economic status. All national financial regulations, monitoring protocols, and legal restrictions permanently nullified for host. All current and future host assets fully federally certified and internationally recognized. Host influence upgraded to Tier 5. Global sovereign. The game had changed completely. I was no longer just the only rich man in a broken world. I was a legally recognized global economic sovereign, above all governments, all laws, all systems, a one-man superpower dictating the fate of humanity. Section 8. The glowing system prompt faded slowly from my field of vision, yet the weight of its declaration lingered heavily in the air, embedding itself into every corner of my quiet suburban living room. Tier 5 Global Sovereign. That single classification erased every last trace of my former identity as an ordinary civilian, dismantled every legal and governmental barrier that had once constrained human life, and elevated me to a stand-alone superpower equal to, if not surpassing, every sovereign nation on Earth. Governments regulated citizens, enforced laws, and controlled assets, but no government on the planet had any jurisdiction over me. I was outside the system, above the system, and capable of rewriting the system itself with every casual purchase I chose to make. Elaine Voss watched the subtle shift in my demeanor with quiet deference, her professional poise softening into unreserved respect. She knew far better than any ordinary official what this official certification truly meant. The White House and U.S. Treasury had not merely struck a deal with a privileged individual, they had formally surrendered regulatory supremacy, admitted governmental powerlessness, and recognized my autonomous economic sovereignty on the global stage. In the fragile new world order, the United States was no longer the dominant financial hegemon. I was. All formal certifications and legal exemptions will be digitally filed and publicly verified through international economic databases within the hour, Elaine stated firmly, her tone meticulous and dutiful. No longer the negotiating diplomat but a senior official reporting to a higher authority. Your Boeing 747's airworthiness credentials, global flight clearance, and private asset registration have already been updated in the FAA and ICAO systems. No federal agency, international task force, or law enforcement body will retain any monitoring access to your personal records, asset transactions, or daily activities. Your absolute privacy and sovereign status are legally ironclad, permanent and irrevocable. Her words were not promises or tentative agreements. They were official, finalized global rulings, carved into the new legal framework of a crumbling world. I nodded faintly, my expression calm and unperturbed, fully embracing the unprecedented authority I now wielded. The 7-12 moratorium stands. I will withhold large-scale systemic purchases to grant global nations time to restructure their emergency frameworks. Elaine's tense shoulders fully relaxed, a deep, genuine breath of relief escaping her. For Washington, my temporary restraint was nothing short of a lifeline, a fragile reprieve from total global annihilation. In their eyes, I held the ability to plunge humanity into irreversible chaos at any moment, and my willingness to pause was the only thing keeping countless nations from collapsing entirely. On behalf of the entire global economic community, thank you, Mr. Hale, she said sincerely. Your restraint buys billions of people a chance at survival. We will honor every term of our agreement without exception. With that, she offered a slight, formal boa gesture no senior U.S. official would ever deliver to a private citizen in the old world. It was a subtle, unmistakable acknowledgement of my superior sovereign status. She then turned and exited my living room quietly, stepping back into the chaotic world waiting beyond my front door. The moment my front door clicked shut behind her, the quiet reprieve inside my home was shattered instantly by a tidal wave of global activity unfolding across every digital platform and official channel. My official sovereign status certification had leaked within seconds of being filed, spreading across international government networks, financial databases, and global news wires at light speed. The entire world erupted once more. But this time it was not just mass panic or shocked speculation, it was frantic, desperate global lobbying. Every major nation, every economic alliance, every international organization was scrambling to establish contact with me, eager to curry favor with the one-man superpower who now controlled the fate of human civilization. My private phone lines, email servers, and encrypted contact channels were immediately flooded with high-level diplomatic requests. Heads of state, central bank governors, prime ministers, and international trade leaders sent urgent, private messages, all bearing the same humble, supplicant tone. No more arrogance. No more global posturing. No more national dominance displays. Every powerful figure on earth was now begging for my attention, my mercy, and my willingness to stabilize their collapsing economies. European Union officials sent formal diplomatic invitations, offering exclusive trade partnerships, tax exemptions, and unlimited European asset access in exchange for my economic favor. Middle Eastern oil consortiums pleaded for private negotiations, willing to surrender resource rights and territorial privileges just to secure a fraction of my spending power. Asian financial leaders submitted humble appeal letters, promising unlimited political and legal immunity within their borders, desperate to avoid total economic collapse in their nations. Overnight, every global power dynamic had flipped completely. Nations that once dictated global trade rules, controlled resource distribution, and dominated international finance were now powerless supplicants, crawling to a single ordinary man for survival. I flipped open my phone casually, scrolling through the endless stream of diplomatic messages and summit invitations with detached indifference. All their offers were hollow, all their privileges meaningless. They could offer me land, resources, status, and diplomatic honors, but they had nothing I actually needed. My system privilege granted me infinite purchasing power over every asset on the entire planet. No national alliance, no political title, no diplomatic favor could enhance my power in the slightest. While the global elite groveled online, I shifted my gaze back to the front yard, where the full weight of my new status played out in brutally humiliating fashion for the two people who'd once dared to look down on me. The federal perimeter outside had shifted entirely in demeanor. The agents no longer stood merely on standby, they maintained a rigid, protective barrier, actively blocking civilians from approaching my property. The neighborhood crowd had mostly dispersed, terrified by the display of federal authority and the gravity of my global status, leaving only Serena and Tristan stranded alone on the sidewalk. Isolated and utterly destitute in every sense of the word, they had witnessed every second of the high-level negotiation, watched the top U.S. economic official bow to me, seen the entire federal contingent treat me as a supreme global power. Every last illusion they'd clung to, every shred of their former pride and superiority, had been completely incinerated. Tristan's once confident posture was completely broken, his shoulders hunched forward, his head hung low, and his hands trembled uncontrollably at his sides. The gold bracelets and necklaces he'd once flaunted as eternal, unshakable wealth now hung loose and pathetic around his neck and wrists, worthless trinkets that mocked his past arrogance. He'd spent months mocking my stable digital savings, preaching the supremacy of physical tangible assets, and belittling me for being ordinary and unambitious. Now, he was the poorest, most foolish man in the entire neighborhood. A public laughingstock whose every past word was a testament to his blinding stupidity. He had once stood above me, sneered at my lifestyle, and stolen my girlfriend to feed his empty ego. Now, the gap between us was no longer rich versus poor, successful versus average. It was cosmic. I was a globally recognized economic sovereign, courted by presidents and prime ministers, capable of collapsing or reviving nations with a single transaction. He was a penniless, statusless nobody, trapped in universal poverty, forgotten by the world and stripped of every fake achievement he'd ever boasted about. Serena's state was even more pitiful. Her earlier tears of regret had dried into hollow, hopeless despair. She stood stock-still on the sidewalk, her beautiful features twisted into a mask of utter agony and disbelief, staring blankly at my front door as if she could rewind time and undo her irreversible mistake. She had dumped me because she craved wealth, status, and security. She had believed Tristan's flashy gold assets and superficial charm represented success, while my quiet, steady savings were boring, useless, and unimpressive. She had chosen temporary vanity over infinite power, empty status over unbreakable wealth, and a fraudulent fake over the only real superpower the world had ever seen. In a single day, she had traded a life of unlimited luxury, global privilege, and sovereign power for a future of endless poverty, crushing regret, and total obscurity. Every dream she'd ever chased, wealth, prestige, comfort, social superiority, was now mine entirely, while she was left with nothing but the bitter, unescapable knowledge of her own catastrophic foolishness. I could see the silent pleas in her eyes, the desperate longing to be let back in, to apologize sincerely, to cling to my power and salvage the future she had stupidly thrown away. But there was no sympathy in my chest, no flicker of mercy, no lingering affection. Every trace of my past feelings for her had died the moment she chose arrogance and vanity over loyalty and stability. Her regret was well earned, her suffering fully deserved. What made their downfall even more poetic was the fact that they were no longer even relevant enough for me to hate. They were not rivals, not enemies, not even nuisances. They were mere ants staring up at a god, insignificant and invisible in the grand scheme of my world-altering status. My life now revolved around global politics, international economic order, and reshaping the future of humanity. They were trapped in the dust of my old ordinary life, left behind to drown in the ruins of the broken world they'd helped value above me. I watched silently as a pair of sheriff deputies approached the two of them, speaking to them in firm, dismissive tones. With my official sovereign status active, all civilian perimeter restrictions were fully enforced. No unauthorized personnel were permitted to loiter near my residence. No exceptions. The deputies did not treat them like scorned lovers or local residents, they treated them like trivial trespassers, irrelevant nobodies bothering a global sovereign's private property. Tristan tried to argue weakly, his voice hoarse and defeated. But the deputies shut him down instantly with a stern warning. He had no status, no privilege, no leverage. He was just another broke, powerless civilian with no rights to plead, no standing to argue, no dignity left to defend. Serena did not resist at all. She simply turned away slowly, her eyes still locked on my window, her face hollow and lifeless. As the two of them were escorted away from my driveway and forced down the street, every step they took was a step further from the infinite future they'd lost, deeper into the hopeless poverty that now defined their trivial lives. As they vanished from sight, I turned my attention back to my phone, where the global diplomatic storm continued to rage unchecked. New summit requests poured in by the minute, world leaders competing desperately to be the first to secure my favor. Terrified of being left behind in the new world order I controlled entirely, I scrolled through the endless list of national appeals, international partnership offers, and presidential invitations, a faint, knowing smile tugging at my lips. The old world was truly dead. Gone were the days where national governments controlled global wealth, where elite billionaires dictated market trends, where status and gold and social standing defined human worth. All old hierarchies had been incinerated by the universal price collapse, and a single new hierarchy had risen in its place, at the absolute top, with every nation, every elite, every human being on earth beneath my feet. I had granted the world 72 hours of fragile stability, a temporary reprieve from my world-shaking spending power, but once that window closed, I would no longer hold back. I would expand my assets on a global scale, acquire national-level resources, rewrite international economic rules, and fully establish my dominance over every corner of the broken planet. The global elites were begging for mercy. My ex and her foolish lover were drowning in regret and poverty. The entire world waited breathlessly for my next move, and I was finally ready to stop merely watching the war. Change and start rebuilding it entirely in my image. Section 9. The afternoon Florida sunlight streamed through my living room window, warm and ordinary, a stark contradiction to the earth-shaking storm brewing across every corner of the globe. Outside my house, the federal perimeter remained rigid and silent. Dozens of elite agents standing guard with unwavering discipline, their every action centered around protecting my safety and preserving my peaceful reprieve. To them, I was no longer a civilian residing in a suburban neighborhood. I was the world's last economic anchor, a sovereign entity whose mood, decisions, and willingness to cooperate would determine the survival of billions of human lives. I sank back into my soft couch, resting my head against the cushion, and unlocked my phone. The moment the screen lit up, it was flooded with non-stop notifications, thousands upon thousands of unread messages, emails, and encrypted diplomatic alerts that refused to cease. The entire global political and financial elite had dropped every urgent crisis, every national emergency, every ongoing disaster to focus on a singular goal: winning my favor. No longer were these generic, formal template appeals. Within minutes of my Tier 5 global sovereign status being internationally ratified, every major world leader had personally drafted private, hand-tailored messages, casting aside all diplomatic arrogance, national pride, and political posturing to beg for my attention. The President of the United States sent a direct, encrypted White House communique, bypassing every bureaucratic channel. No press releases, no public statements. Only a humble private plea. He offered unlimited presidential-level privileges, permanent immunity from all federal oversight, exclusive use of any national facility, and full access to U.S. strategic resources. His message carried one simple, desperate request: sustained economic leniency to prevent America's total societal collapse. Across the Atlantic, the President of the European Union issued a personal appeal, offering unconditional open border policies, exclusive European residency rights for life, unlimited access to every luxury asset across all EU member states, and a permanent diplomatic seat at every European Economic Summit. Once proud nations that had spent centuries competing for global financial dominance now lined up obediently, willing to surrender every ounce of their economic autonomy just to earn a fraction of my goodwill. Middle Eastern royal families, once synonymous with infinite oil wealth and unrivaled regional power, sent urgent private letters pledging full resource allegiance. They offered private desert palaces, exclusive offshore oil field rights, unlimited access to their national reserves, and even personal royal escort detail, humbly stating that their entire national wealth and resources were mine to command. The oil barons who once dictated global energy prices now knelt in submission, fully aware that their entire economic foundation was worthless before my infinite purchasing power. Asian financial superpowers followed suit, their heads of state submitting deferential appeals that abandoned all formal political rigidity. They offered exclusive investment partnerships, custom-built private estates in prime urban districts, and full exemption from all regional laws and regulations, vowing to adjust their entire national economic frameworks to align with my every preference, every global power, every ruling elite. Every dominant force that had shaped human economics for centuries was now unified in one desperate, humiliating pursuit, pleasing me. I scrolled through the mountain of high-level offers with complete indifference, my expression calm and unimpressed. All their gifts, privileges, and concessions were nothing but empty gestures. They offered me land I could buy for pennies, palaces I could acquire for less than $1, status I had already far surpassed on my own. Their greatest national treasures were trivial trinkets in the face of my system-granted authority, and their desperate attempts to curry favor only further cemented how thoroughly the old world order had crumbled. While the global elite groveled in private, public internet discourse devolved into absolute, unreserved worship. Every social media platform, news forum, and streaming channel was dominated by discussions of my sovereign status, my unrivaled power, and my ability to reshape humanity's future. The earlier waves of fear and panic had faded entirely, replaced by pure awe, reverence, and unbridled gratitude from ordinary civilians. Ordinary people across every continent understood the brutal new reality clearer than any politician. Every government, every billionaire, every powerful institution had failed them in their hour of need. All their life savings, their hard-earned wealth, their lifelong sacrifices had been erased overnight. The only hope left for humanity, the only chance to rebuild civilization and escape universal poverty, rested solely on my shoulders. Viral posts flooded every trending page by the millions, forming a global chorus of public deference and worship. All governments are powerless. Only Ethan Hale holds real power now. He didn't break the world, it broke a corrupt, unfair economic system that only favored the rich. He's our only hope. If he chooses to help us, humanity survives. If he doesn't, we all fall into anarchy. Presidents beg for his attention. Billionaires are poorer than beggars next to him. He's the new god of this world. The public perception shift was absolute and irreversible. Overnight, I had transformed from a mysterious viral anomaly into humanity's sole savior, a transcendent figure above all criticism, all judgment, and all worldly power. Any rare comment that dared to question me or doubt my intentions was instantly buried under waves of public pushback. Every civilian fully aware that offending the world's only economic sovereign meant dooming their own chance at survival. As global worship reached its peak, I caught sight of a local trending thread that pulled back the curtain on the final pathetic downfall of Serena and Tristan, after being escorted away from my property by sheriff deputies. The two of them had become the town's most despised and pitted spectacle overnight. Local social media pages had fully exposed their entire story: how Serena had dumped me mere hours before the global collapse for Tristan's fake gold wealth. How the pair had come to my door to mock my ordinary life. How they'd begged for forgiveness and been utterly rejected. Every arrogant comment they'd ever made, every shallow boast, every cruel judgment toward me was resurfaced and spread across every local community group. Tristan's once glamorous social media profile, once filled with fake luxury flexes and arrogant financial hot takes, was now a public dumpster fire. Every resident in our neighborhood, every local peer who had once envied his flashy lifestyle, now mocked his blinding stupidity. The gold assets he'd sacrificed everything to flaunt were worthless. The status he chased was erased, and the girl he'd stolen was left drowning in endless regret. He was no longer seen as a successful playboy, he was the biggest fool in the entire state. A cautionary tale for every person who chased fake wealth over genuine stability. Serena's reputation fared even worse. Once admired for her beauty, her charm, and her seemingly perfect life, She was now universally condemned as the shallowest, most short-sighted person alive. Local netizens tore into her ruthless decision-making, dissecting how she traded a life of infinite global sovereignty for a few worthless gold trinkets and empty vanity. Every person in the community understood the sheer scale of her mistake. She had abandoned the only man in the world with real, unbreakable power, and she would spend the rest of her life living with that irreversible regret. Pictures of the two of them standing dejectedly on my sidewalk, teary-eyed and defeated, were circulating everywhere, becoming the most viral meme of the new era. The caption underneath every photo was always the same cold, unforgiving truth. They chose gold over a god. They were no longer minor characters in my story, no longer fleeting nuisances from my old life. They were the world's most vivid example of karmic ruin, a permanent reminder of how trivial old world status and wealth had become in the new era I ruled. I scrolled past their humiliating downfall without a single twinge of emotion. They were truly beneath my notice now. My world no longer included petty personal grudges, trivial romantic regrets, or local social drama. My every decision rippled across nations, shaped global policy, and dictated the fate of billions. A soft news system prompt flickered across my vision, clear and authoritative, marking my complete dominance over global public opinion and international power structures. Post-global influence upgraded to Tier 6. Worldwide dominance. Global public favor baseline. 98. Mass public worship established. All national political barriers fully dissolved. Host possesses unrestricted access to all global assets, territories, and resources. 72-hour stability moratorium countdown active. 71 hours. 48 minutes remaining. The system's notification confirmed what I had already known. I was no longer bound by any limit, any rule, or any power on earth. The temporary spending pause I'd granted the world was nothing more than a voluntary mercy, a brief grace period for humanity to stabilize itself before I fully asserted my rule over the broken planet. I locked my phone once more, cutting off the endless stream of global pleas and desperate appeals, and stood up from the couch. I walked to the window, gazing out at the quiet suburban street, at the federal agents standing rigid guard, at the ordinary houses that surrounded mine. This quiet neighborhood, this ordinary town, this mundane life I'd once lived was now the center of the entire world. Every eye on the planet was fixed on this house, fixed on me, waiting breathlessly for my next move. The presidents, prime ministers, and royal families of the world knelt at my feet. The internet worshipped my every action. My betrayers wallowed in eternal regret and public humiliation. The old world's hierarchies, values, and power structures were nothing but ash beneath my feet. A slow, confident smile spread across my lips. The grace period was still active. The world had a little more time to cling to its fragile stability, but when the clock ran out, I would no longer hold back. I would buy entire cities. I would acquire private national territories. I would purchase corporate conglomerates, resource empires, and global infrastructure networks. I would reshape every corner of this broken world, rebuild the global economic system from the ground up, and establish a new order where I reigned supreme, unchallenged, and eternal. Humanity had spent centuries building a world ruled by money and status. Now, the world would be ruled solely by me. Section 10. The quiet ticking of the system countdown echoed faintly in the back of my mind, a constant, subtle reminder of the boundary I'd set for the entire world. 71 hours and 48 minutes remained of my voluntary stability moratorium. 71 hours for global governments to scramble, restructure, and cling to the last fragments of their fading authority before I unleashed my full purchasing power upon the broken planet. Every world leader clung to this tiny window of time like a lifeline, praying they could patch together a fragile global order before I chose to dismantle it entirely and build a new one in my image. For the next full day, I remained in my suburban home, observing the world's desperate struggle from the sidelines like an indifferent god watching mortals scramble to rearrange crumbling sandcastles. Outside my gates, the federal perimeter only grew tighter and more disciplined. Additional elite task force units rotated in to reinforce security, establishing a full-block exclusion zone around my neighborhood. No civilians, no media crews, no unauthorized personnel were permitted within hundreds of feet of my residence. The entire area had become a restricted global sovereign zone, a neutral territory above all national law. Solely under my implicit rule, the global diplomatic frenzy never ceased for a single second. New appeals, summit invitations, and exclusive partnership offers flooded my encrypted channels every minute. G7 nations banded together to draft a joint global treaty, offering me a permanent supranational governance seat with veto power over every international economic policy. Smaller, vulnerable nations begged for exclusive protection pacts, promising tax sovereignty, territorial access, and full resource tribute in exchange for my mercy and potential economic aid. Every offer was grandiose, every concession unprecedented in human history, yet every last one of them was fundamentally useless. They sought to integrate me into their broken systems, to bind my infinite power to their fragile rules, to limit my influence within the frameworks of the old world. They failed to understand the core truth of the new era. I did not need a seat at their table. I was the table. I did not need their treaties, their titles, or their protection. I held the ability to buy their entire nations outright with pocket change. I ignored every single plea, every treaty draft, every desperate attempt at alliance building. Let the world leaders exhaust themselves with empty diplomacy. Let them waste their time scrambling for solutions that would never work. All their efforts were merely delaying the complete collapse of old global power and the rise of my personal empire, while elites wallowed in desperate uncertainty. Public global worship continued to skyrocket. Every mainstream media outlet ran non-stop specials dissecting my every past move, framing me as humanity's sole divine savior. Documentary-style segments replayed my $3 Boeing purchase on loop, calling it the single most transformative event in human economic history. Live streams dedicated to tracking my every subtle movement gained billions of cumulative views, with global audiences hanging on every tiny action I took. Terrified of displeasing their only hope of survival, Serena and Tristan's downfall continued to deepen, their names becoming universal symbols of foolish regret across every local community and global forum. After being escorted from my neighborhood, the pair had lost every last shred of social standing and basic dignity. Local residents who once admired their superficial success now shunned them entirely. Strangers mocked them openly on the street, recognizing their viral faces instantly from the millions of circulating memes and posts. Tristan's gold trinkets, once his proudest possessions, became a humiliating albatross around his neck. Every time he wore his bracelets or necklaces, passers-by laughed and jeered, reminding him endlessly of how he traded real, infinite wealth for worthless metal. He'd lost his social status, his reputation, his relationship, and all hope of a stable future, reduced to a penniless, delusional fool scorned by an entire community. His arrogant confidence was gone entirely, replaced by a hollow, defeated paranoia that lingered in every shaky step he took. Serena fared even worse. Trapped in a relentless cycle of crippling regret that consumed her every waking moment. She was no longer viewed as a beautiful, charming young woman. She was the poster child for the worst decision in human history. Every social group barred her entry. Every former friend cut off contact. Every acquaintance whispered about her behind her back. She'd abandoned a global sovereign for a fake rich nobody, and the entire world knew it. The endless judgment and unescapable regret chipped away at her sanity day by day, leaving her hollow, broken, and utterly alone. They were no longer even worthy of my contempt. They were merely background rubble in the wake of my ascension, trivial remnants of the old, dead world I'd left far behind. As the final hours of my voluntary moratorium ticked down, global tension swelled to a breaking point. Financial markets remained fully frozen. Supply chains lay in complete ruin, and civilian unrest simmered in every major city. Governments had accomplished nothing in their 7-12 grace period. No new functional economic frameworks had been established. No stable value systems had been rebuilt. No solutions to the universal poverty crisis had been found. All their efforts had been futile, all their planning meaningless in the face of my unrivaled power. The system countdown finally flashed across my vision in bold, blazing text, marking the end of global humanity's last reprieve. 72-hour global stability moratorium expired. Host spending restraints fully lifted. Full global asset purchasing authority unlocked without restriction. New era initialization complete. Host imperial sovereignty phase activated. A faint, cold smile tugged at my lips as the prompts faded. The waiting game was over. The world had been given every chance to stabilize itself, every opportunity to rebuild on its own terms. Now, it was my turn to take control. I returned to my laptop, opening the global high-value asset trading platform that had once catered exclusively to billionaires, multinational corporations, and national investment funds. Before the collapse, this site hosted the most exclusive high-value assets on the planet: private islands, luxury resort chains, corporate headquarters, energy conglomerates, coastal manors, and entire commercial districts. Now, every single one of these once priceless assets sat listed at post-collapse rock-bottom prices, available for purchase by anyone with functional, unaltered wealth, namely, only me. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, no longer hesitant, no longer holding back for the world's fragile feelings. I began my takeover in earnest. Starting with foundational global resource assets, the true backbone of modern economic power. First, I purchased a full offshore Gulf of Mexico oil field complex, complete with drilling rigs, storage facilities, transport pipelines, and full operational staff. A resource that once generated billions in annual revenue for energy giants and controlled critical portions of U.S. fuel supply cost me a grand total of $12. Next, I acquired a sprawling private island chain in the Caribbean, a collection of 5 untouched prime islands previously owned by a Middle Eastern royal dynasty, complete with private harbors, luxury villa compounds, exclusive beachfront territories, and full territorial autonomy. The entire archipelago cost me merely $8. I continued my relentless acquisition spree without pause, I purchased the global headquarters of a top-tier Wall Street investment bank. A towering skyscraper occupying prime Manhattan real estate. For $4, I bought an entire coastal luxury resort chain spanning 3 continents, complete with hundreds of hotels, private beaches, and premium hospitality facilities. For $15, I seized ownership of a major international shipping logistics company that controlled global cargo trade routes, securing full control over cross-border resource transportation for a mere $9. Every purchase cleared instantly, legally, and irrevocably. Every title transferred to my name within seconds. Every operational system unlocked to my sole authority. Every asset that once defined old-world wealth and corporate power was now mine. Acquired for loose change. Each transaction sent a new shockwave rippling through the global economic system. Live financial monitoring screens across every nation spiked with unprecedented volatility. Emergency alarms blared in central bank control rooms, White House crisis bunkers, and G7 summit chambers worldwide. Every new purchase of mine dismantled another layer of the dying old-world economy, erasing the last traces of traditional corporate and national resource power. Global social media erupted into absolute bedlam, but this time, there was no panic. No fervently frenzied, devout celebration. He's building his own empire. Oil fields, islands, skyscrapers, shipping retesh buying the entire world. The old billionaires own pieces of the planet. He owns the planet itself. This is the new world order. No nations. No corporations. No elites, only Ethan Hale. World leaders watched my unbridled asset harvest in helpless despair. Their earlier treaty offers and alliance pleas rendered completely irrelevant. They could do nothing to stop me, nothing to slow my takeover, nothing to preserve their fading national power. Every regulatory law, every trade restriction, every territorial ownership rule was useless against my sovereign purchasing authority. I was not competing with their nations or corporations, I was absorbing them, piece by piece, into my private domain. A new system prompt flashed brightly across my vision, marking the official birth of my private global empire. Post-core private asset foundation established. Multiple strategic global resources, territories, and corporate assets consolidated under sole host ownership. Influence upgraded to Tier 7. Global imperial ruler. Private global empire officially founded. All acquired assets exempt from all national jurisdiction. Fully sovereign to host rule. I leaned back in my chair, surveying the endless list of verified asset titles now registered solely under my name, and let a genuine, unreserved smile spread across my face. No more playing by the world's rules. No more granting mercy or grace periods. No more watching from the sidelines as powerless nations floundered in the ruins of their broken economy. I now controlled global energy resources, international trade routes, prime global real estate, and elite commercial infrastructure. I owned assets that once made kings, billionaires, and superpowers tremble with power. My private empire stood above every nation, every government, every human institution in existence. Down on the distant sidewalk, I caught a blurry glimpse of Serena and Tristan standing frozen, staring helplessly toward my house. They could see the global broadcasts, hear the worldwide celebrations, and understand the terrifying, glorious truth of what I'd become. The gap between us was no longer unmeasurable, it was cosmic. They wallowed in universal poverty and public shame, while I ruled the entire planet as its sole imperial sovereign. The old world was dead and buried, and my empire had officially risen from its ashes. And that's a wrap, folks. If this story gave you that sweet dopamine hit and was more satisfying than peeling the plastic off a brand new TV, do me a massive favor. Obliterate that like button and hit subscribe. I'm locked in the content mine, serving up fresh, ridiculously satisfying stories every single day. See you tomorrow for your next fix.